This
that I
conference will
referenced
now be recorded.
in the previous application. The ordinance, the city ordinance that Philip cited at the beginning of the meeting, as well as the Historic Conservation Commission design guidelines concerning demolition. There's actually a whole section within the guidelines specifically concerning demolition. And I'm going to quote from that specific guideline. It states, the Historic Conservation Commission will not recommend approval for demolition unless the proposed demolition involves a non-significant building, provided that the demolition will not adversely affect those portions of the building that are significant, end quote. So based on those various citations and guidelines, my following evaluation. The Historic Conservation Commission meeting agenda identifies this as a discussion item, and there is no certificate of appropriateness application. So that implies to me that the applicant is simply requesting a dialogue with HCC before he or she finalizes their intentions to with the two existing structures in the adjacent empty lots. This means the current decision or discussion will not result in any resolution. Rather, the applicant is encouraged to use the results of today's discussion as a guide for successfully moving forward with their envisioned development. The accompanying cover letter with the application, or again, no full official application, but I'm sorry, the cover letter with the submittal materials requests to demolish both structures, quote, on the demonstrated lack of structural integrity of the properties, the minimal amount of retained historic importance of the two properties, and the prohibitive costs required to repair these buildings, end quote. That cover letter is accompanied by a series of photographs which document various details of the exterior facades. Many of those photographs focus on the end wall depiction, the west wall of 16 through 18 West 3rd Street, detailing both before and after the installation of the wood shoring. Two photos depict the rear of the properties and confirm that the original building configuration has been modified over time at the back, while the remaining photos depict various components of the front facades. The cover letter notes, quote, structural modifications and renovations to repair the structure would prove to be difficult and prohibitively expensive, end quote. However, a cost estimate that would compare the needed modifications and renovations with potential replaced construction, at least I could not find any provided. Similarly, the applicant provides an updated cover letter to a previous structural analysis conducted in 2016. However, when I read through that assessment, it is only limited to the west wall and does not really identify the issues associated with the remaining structure or the adjacent building at 14 West Street. The cover letter continues, quote, over 75% of the facades of these buildings have no redeeming value and, in fact, present an extremely negative presence on this very important part of South Bethlehem, end quote. However, in my opinion, both structures currently serve as the few remaining reminders of those three-story commercial and residential structures that once defined the architectural style and scale along both sides of this portion of West 3rd Street. As contributing resources within the Historic Conservation District, proposed demolition of existing structures at 14, 16, 18 West 3rd Street is not considered appropriate. The requests for demolition approved by HCC in the past are typically predicated on the applicant's intent to replace lost buildings with new structures. So the commissioners must consider if the resulting development is an acceptable compromise for the loss of two contributing structures. The cover letter concludes with reference to provided, quote, scale drawing of the existing facade, images of the planned development, images of the approved adjacent development, and site plan indicating the bounds of the properties, end quote. Unfortunately, none of these items accompanied the cover letter, the engineering report, or the photographs. To scale drawings of proposed developments are always required or would be required for any kind of future assessment, just as a note to the applicant. The applicant is also strongly encouraged to cooperate with a professional planning firm exhibiting previous design experience within historic districts. Future Historic Conservation Commission assessments of any proposed development would be based upon the applicant's ability to respect the existing design guidelines concerning alterations, adaptive reuse, and additions within the Historic Conservation District. So within the guidelines, there's a whole section, again, if the HCC ultimately agrees some kind of change to these facades that would then ultimately guide any kind of development, either alteration, adaptive reuse, addition, or reconstruction. I will include those, summary of those guidelines for minutes purposes, but for time purposes, I'm not going to go through those right now, but they are in the design guidelines that are available from the city's website and can also be picked up in print from the planning office. They do have to deal with things such as size, scale, and proportion, shape and massing, materials, roofs, streetscapes, those kind of things. So again, it's important if things do move forward that those design guidelines play a role in whatever is developed at the project site. So that concludes my assessment of the proposal to demolish both buildings.
All right, thank you very much, Jeffrey. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Joe Posh to tell us about his project.
Okay, thank you. As we discussed, I put this property under agreement. I kind of lost track of time a little bit. I think in December or January. I'm not sure. And we're working with Spillman Farmer, Dan Harrigan, who was going to be on the call. I don't think he is, but he was going to be. And our plans basically entail, besides these two properties, the acquisition of the Bedco properties that finish out the triangle, and then the construction of we've had a couple variations, but we'll say a 5 or 6 story building with some form of retail or restaurant service on the first floor and office space on the upper floors. The reason we're here is a discussion point. We had a meeting with Jeff and some others from informally with Alicia and a couple of others, in combination with Bedco, to show them sort of what we were doing. And we thought the best way to get started, with Darlene's input as well, was to come for this discussion point, talk about what we're doing, talk about the buildings, because obviously from our standpoint, moving forward, we looked at some options of trying to incorporate these buildings, and we cannot do it from a reasonable development standpoint. So really the first start here is to talk about what can be done or what can be talked about to facilitate the demolition of these buildings, ultimately in conjunction with the development of our plan, knowing that we have to come back many times on the new plan and how it fits in with what the regulations are and the guidelines going forward.
Okay. Joe, could you elaborate on the conditions, and if you could tell us maybe the facade, the side, the back, and then go to the interior and just tell us more about the structure?
Yeah, so I mean, it's well documented that the west side of the building and the state of collapse that has happened there, that resulting in the shoring that everybody has seen. And as Jeff mentioned, when the other building was demolished a while ago, it exposed that building or that wall as a wall that shouldn't have been exposed, from an original construction standpoint. So that wall is in pretty bad shape. And as the letter from Lockridge, from Scott Gold mentioned, that structures a lot of lath and brick, and it's deteriorated pretty significantly, pulling away from the internal structure. The rear, where the patio is also pulled away and it's not really supported. So that from the outside, the front has a lot of cracks, but over the front is the least of the issues. Interiorly, the building has been empty, I think, for about 5 years, around there, and it's had several roof leaks that have caused just collapse and falling of the lath and the plaster, and warping and general mildew damage of the wood structures inside, the wood members inside. So it's in pretty rough shape.
And at this time, the building is completely vacant.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, so Joe, I'm going to open it up to our board members to ask questions or just simply have dialogue with you so we can talk about your project. So I ask any of the board members to begin.
I'll jump in there, Philip. This is Craig
Thank you.
Evans. I recognize that the building might be vacant right now. It has not been vacant for 5 years, as you mentioned, because I watched people move their belongings out of there within like the last 6 or 8 months. It is, in my opinion, the two buildings are properties that have been allowed to get to this state, demolition by neglect. It is some 7 or so years at least mentioned by Scott Gold, and Scott's certainly a reputable engineer. I've used him myself in circumstances. And he acknowledges that that this has gone back quite a while, and it would seem to me that there should have been some better effort made at saving this structure or these structures over the course of time. They are significant. They're the equivalent of the orchard knoll across the street that we had no control over because it was under eminent domain from the state. This is part of the developmental history of the city, and these buildings are, as Jeffrey noted, definitely contributing. That isn't to say that they don't need work. Obviously they do. But the verbal description that we're getting of, well, we'll put up something here, and it'll be 5 or 6 stories, and it'll move over here and it'll fill in the triangle, isn't enough for us to really make any evaluation on. We would need to see something a whole lot more specific and complete in detail to entertain the idea of demolishing these buildings. So much for what I need to say right now. I'll listen to more dialogue, but.
Can I, Mr. Evans, have you seen the renderings and drawings we have provided?
No.
No.
If not,
No, they have not, Joe. No.
Nothing.
okay, because we have spent a considerable amount of resources.
And that's fine. I don't object to, I'm just saying that we are not in a position to make any determination on such a thing as long as we haven't seen them. If they exist, that's fine, and we'll be glad to look at them and have further discussion. But at this point, without them, it's moot.
And if I address the neglect just for a second, again, we are the equitable owner, put it under contract 6 months ago, or whatever the time frame was. So we do not have any real control or say in the current condition or the maintenance thereof.
That's actually what I wanted to ask about. Who owned this building before you got it under contract? How long ago, that's one question. How long ago was 20 West 4th Street torn down so that brick wall that was an interior brick wall became exposed to the elements? Those are 2 questions, I guess, for Darlene, I mean, or Jeff, or Philip.
So if I can help here, I believe the adjacent building, correct me if I'm wrong, may have been the Aztec Club, and that burned down, I'm guessing, well over 25 years ago. And it was a significant fire, and the building was demolition directly after the fire.
And then who has owned these 2 properties or 3 properties since that fire?
Phil, not to correct. Phil,
I think
not
it
to
was
correct.
4 Gs.
but the 4Gs was to the right of this building, and then Gertz Bar was on the triangle. The Aztec Club was on the left side, next to the refugee men's warehouse. The Aztec Club was on the left.
Okay.
Correct.
I see. Okay.
So who owns these two buildings or has owned these two buildings before Mr. Posh has been putting it under contract? Who owns it?
It's a partnership controlled by Doug Kelly of Emerald Ridge. I don't know exactly. I don't have it in front of me my contract, what his entity name is. But I believe he's owned them for, I'm going to say it, 15 years. I think in that neighborhood. I don't know exactly though.
Yeah. Well, the city should know, and we need to know that before we can. And I don't think you should buy these buildings unless somebody fixes them up for you first.
Well, I certainly will not close on a purchase of these buildings without a whole lot of more things going on. Yeah.
Because we have a big demolition of neglect problem right here, and I, for one, am not going to let these buildings be torn down because of demolition from neglect. It's got to stop.
There's a caller 5 in here. Is that the press? Do you know?
I don't know. Should I ask?
Do you mind asking?
No. May I ask, we have a caller number 5 on our screen. Could you identify yourself and tell us who you are? And if you have a question, you could ask the question.
The initials are CO.
Yeah, you're unmuted.
Do you wish to identify yourself? All right, well, we're going to move on.
Okay.
Roger, can I ask you for your comments?
That facade, the front of those buildings is magnificent.
Roger, could I ask you to be a little bit closer to your microphone to help us hear you?
Better? Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. The front facade of those buildings is what are important to me. Is there a way to build whatever you're going to build around that? The bottom of that front on the bottom where the white squares are, I think that's relatively new compared to the rest of the buildings. But the rest of that, the front facade, if they could be incorporated into the new building, tear the rest of it down. But the facade is beautiful. It's south side, and I think there was a sports store in there. I remember getting fishing licenses or something in there at one point. But Beth is right. Demolition by neglect. They were just let go and let go and let go.
So, Mr. Hudak, we did do a couple sketches showing the facades incorporated into just the facades incorporated into a new structure. And we did do.
I think we can take it off. Yeah.
Okay.
And so those are available. Darlene, I don't know if we can just share those informally, or is there a process for that, or in this scenario?
The photos of the, I don't think it's something we could do today.
No, not necessarily.
Application?
No, the renderings of the new building.
Oh, I don't have those.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I don't have any.
So Joe, Darlene doesn't have those. But again, I think as we go through each member here and hearing their comments, I know we all would be interested in seeing those. So Roger's idea was something that I think I might add on and elaborate on, and that would be to, try to reuse those same facades, just the facades. And I would say that from the sidewalk to the lower part of the cornice of the first floor would be something that could be a modern aluminum storefront installation, because much of the historic quality of that area has been diminished or has been removed But from there on up, the brick facade is something that I would like to see remain. But here I am talking again, so let me please get through the other members so we can have comments from everyone. So if I can go to Tony next.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Yes, I agree with what you're saying and what Raj said. I proposed that across the street with the banana factory, and of course that got shut down immediately. But hopefully we could save these buildings, because those are the last two buildings that are on that block next to Lehigh Pizza that's going to remain. So I would like to see that remain intact as much as possible. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, Tony. And I'm going to move on to Gary.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with what our other board members have been saying, and I think it would probably help me to see a proposal that shows how the existing facades are incorporated into a new building. You know, I think it's you know, we seem to be losing a lot of buildings like this, and after a while, you know, we're not going to have much of a historic district left. So, you know, I think it's important to, you know, to me, the facades of these two existing buildings are contributing, as Jeff mentioned. You know, they have distinctive features. I think they help make a cityscape, and you know, even though it's up against a very large new building, so I do agree with the conversation so far.
Okay. Are there any board members that have anything else to say? I think I've asked everyone to speak, but is there any additional comments from anyone? Okay. Joe, what else can you tell us?
Well, I think a good start would be to get all these sketches that show a couple different versions of our proposed building, a couple that show the facades, even a few floor plans. There's some, again, different perspectives where we pulled back and showed the existing streetscape with some of these. Some of this was at Jeff's suggestion on how we do this. So I'd like to get those to the board, and we can then, you know, have that looked at, and then come back, you know, just for another discussion like this before we get into something too formal, just to, you know, keep moving forward and having a dialogue.
All right, very good.
Can I ask one
In
more
order,
question?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Joe, I'm just wondering, in the proposals, how many stories do you envision for the new construction?
Well, again, we've had a few versions. We had the versions run from 5 to 7 floors, depending. We had one that was a retail first floor. It's a multifamily, which had a smaller floor height, and then we had some more that were office, which has, of course, a higher floor plate. But they were between 5 and 7 floors, and we're honing that down as we're narrowing in on end users, you know, and demand.
Okay.
And it's we had some the best part of this site is coming down off the bridge. You know, it would be a flat iron shape, as you guys can imagine with the site, and it's pretty dramatic, you know, the way it leads into the rest of the corridor there. So we think it has a lot of potential.
And you said you're working with Dan Harrigan?
Dan Harrigan, yep, over at Spillman. Mm-hmm.
Well, I do believe you're in good hands, but I hope Dan has been in contact with Jeff too, and you know, we're just I'm sure he's well aware of you know, what the Secretary of Interior guidelines are.
Absolutely. Yep. So who should I send those through? Darlene's office, Phil's office? Where should I get those?
Joe, that would be ideal if you send those to Darlene's office. Yes.
Okay. Then we will, all electronic, hard copies, combination. Is there a preference?
Combination, please.
Okay. Absolutely.
So Joe, part of my job here is to ensure that when you come back to see us, that you're very well prepared so we can give you more value for what you're asking about. So whatever you submit, and we've had some problems in the past where we have a lot of renderings, but no firm measurements. So I would ask you to, at least if you're going to give us renderings, please be prepared to answer questions about measurements, height, width, size of window openings, size of door openings, and things like that. It'll be a key to your success.
Okay, understood. Now, okay, and that's a going forward on a new building basis.
I understand.
Is there a, I guess I'm asking from the selective demolition process, is it a parallel path? Is it a linear path? Is there a scenario where you go, okay, we like enough of what you do in a new building, we can entertain the demolition of the building? I guess I'm just trying to ask, what the sort of mechanics of the process.
It's a great question. And I think the answer to that question is it's a combination. It's showing us a building or several styles of building that we've become more familiar with and more comfortable with, so we can begin the dialogue about a new building, or possibly giving us renderings of buildings with the reuse of the facade that's there. That combination is something that is going to be a long conversation, maybe more than one meeting, maybe not. But typically, when we do what I would call a high-rise building, anything over 3 or 4 stories, it typically takes a minimum of 3 meetings. And it's a lot of information to be presented. And the reason I was preparing you is the more information you bring with us, the faster those decisions are rendered by the board.
Okay, I appreciate the input. I really do.
Very good. So we look forward to seeing you in July, I hope.
Maybe even in an actual meeting.
That would be wonderful, because I found this a little challenging, but we got through it. And I don't know how everyone else feels, but I feel at least we got through it.
Yes.
So
I feel
all right,
better
thank
if
you
you
again.
had a mask on, Philip.
I know. Well, I'm in City Hall and I'm required to wear it, so that's why I was on. I apologize. Next time I'll work from home and I won't have a mask on. How's that?
That's fun.
Okay. But I felt that tonight, having my tech person, Darlene, who's done a wonderful job putting all those renderings on our screen for us, was so helpful. And so maybe next time I can do it on my own at home. So we'll see. But that's all I have tonight. Jeffrey, if there's something I missed, please tell me.
Yeah, we open it up for new discussion and also approval of the previous minutes, please.
Okay, so at this time I'll ask, is there any new discussion? Any points that are happening in the community that I should be aware of? Okay, so we'll move right on to the minutes from the March meeting, I believe. And
You guys don't
I'll
need
ask
to-
for,
Right.
I think we're done with Joe. Yes, thank you, Joe.
Thank you all.
So March meeting minutes, can we approve those? Everyone in favor of approving the March minutes?
Second, then approved.
Thank you.
Aye.
I see everyone shaking their head in the right direction, so, okay, very good. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Beth. All right, what else did I miss, Jeffrey? I'm sorry, Beth, what was that?
I don't think I was there. Didn't I miss that meeting?
There were
I'm not
three.
voting.
You know what? I think
Yeah.
you did.
There were
Yep.
3
I'm
of you
not voting.
not present. I always put approval unanimous by those who were present.
That's good, because I wasn't there.
Okay.
I'm not approving. I mean, I
Okay.
I understand.
don't feel like I should because I wasn't there. So I don't
I
know.
understand. No, that's good. Thank you.
So I do want to mention, Darlene, I'm a bit confused. I had the impression that Joe Posh had the impression we had a lot more than we have. I don't know what really happened there.
Well, he didn't I don't have a microphone. Well, I guess I could put mine on, but then there's gonna be echo. I don't know if they can hear me. We did have some discussions with Joe, but it seemed like it was a big request. to talk about removing those buildings. And so we wanted him to get some feedback from the board before we really moved on to a whole lot of other discussions. So we thought this would be his first step, just to talk about the demolition and then see what kind of response he got. I think that would determine whether or not he moves ahead and how he moves ahead. So
And let me say that I appreciate all the board members who are at least listening with an open mind. I mean, as far as Joe Posh goes, he is the potential owner of the property. He's certainly not the individual or individuals who have left it go to nearly demolition by neglect. So I, again, appreciate everyone at least listening with an open mind. And I would ask you, of course, to do that henceforward to see where it takes us. I'm looking forward to having everyone see the renderings.
Philip, I agree with you, and I was a bit disappointed that he didn't elaborate on that on his cover letter. And I will point out the structural report he included only addresses the west wall. I agree there's plenty of issues associated with that building. They should have been presented in some kind of a format. To be fair, with all the other proposals we've had for demolition, we've required them to at least put in writing all the associated issues. I thought I was leading him in that direction, but he didn't either catch that I was leading or he ignored that. So I'll leave it to the fellow commissioners if they require that from him. But based on what he provided, in my opinion, it only addresses the one wall scenario, not the entire building. I'm not trying to be overly procedural. Just wanted to point out that I think his understanding of the building is much more involved in it's not fair of the commissioners to somehow magically come up with that assessment, because it just wasn't provided to us.
I had one other thought. In his letter from Lock Ridge Engineering, it states that it is his understanding, the engineer's understanding, that all or a portion of the damaged wall is owned by the city of Bethlehem. And I think I need some clarification on that, because if Bethlehem owns that wall, then why did they let it stay? How many years has it been since it's been exposed, and why has it not been dealt with?
I didn't see that. I didn't hear.
I don't have any answers for that.
It's in number 1 of the Lock Ridge Engineering letter that he gave us.
Okay.
Oh, I see it. The second sentence. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big
Well,
question mark for me.
Yeah, I think there's a long-standing dispute about who owns what, and I think the city of Bethlehem would probably not agree with that statement. So.
Is that something that's under litigation, or is it just, kind of hanging out?
I don't really know if it's still under litigation. There had been some years ago. I don't know if it was even resolved. I really, I was not directly a part of that, so I don't have accurate information to give you.
It would seem to me that it's something that we ought to know more about, as representatives of the city. The other thing is that I just want to underscore the fact that when we've been asked to entertain demolition, ever since we've gotten burned a couple of times, we look for something that is specific as to how it's going to be replaced.
Oh, yeah.
And does, in fact, the developer who's replacing it have the capacity to make it happen? And so we didn't really discuss that a whole lot at this go round, but I think that needs to be part of the discussion. Philip, whether that's what you present to Joe Posh when he gives you some more information, he needs to know that that's our responsibility to make sure that if there is going to be demolition, something going back in there that is appropriate.
I understand, Craig. And I plan on calling Joe Posh tomorrow. And just as we have with other demolitions, we have always asked for a full engineer's report of the building. And if he wants to include reconstruction costs through RS means, that's fine with us, but it'll help us. And we've asked all others to provide those documents. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be asking him. I should have done that when I still had him in front of me, but I don't, but I will call him tomorrow about that. And so
We trust you.
I just want him to be very prepared for us next time.
And
Yeah.
who can find out about the ownership of that wall by next time?
We can get more information.
From the lawyers or what? How do you do that?
Well, we'll get it. I don't know who we'll get it from. We'll get it.
Okay.
Okay, so ownership of the wall, an engineer's report, and a performance ability. So I will talk to Joe about 2 of those tomorrow, and Darlene's going to work on the other.
Okay, very good.
Okay? Well, everyone, thanks for joining for the June meeting. A little different, but it worked. Yep, very good. So thank you again, everyone.
All right.
Okay.
Good night.
Thanks as well.
Good night.
Appreciate it.
Good night.
See
Good
you next
night.
time. How do you turn this off? Yes.